Hi, Stampin' Piece friends. I'm Mary Nabe. Welcome to my Stampin' Piece studio in Columbus, Ohio. Today I've got two great cards to show you. Both feature the Season of Chic stamp set and coordinating dies. So let me flip my camera around now and we'll get started right away because I know you're going to love these beautiful cards. These are the two lovely cards that we'll be making today. There's a lot happening on them with lots of layers, but you'll find that these cards really are quite easy to make. I'm going to start with the first one that features the petal pink card base. And I'm first going to do my stamping. Since this is a photopolymer stamp set, I'm going to place my Stampin' Pierce mat underneath my cardstock that I'm going to be stamping on. And I'm also going to be using a piece of scrap paper because I do want to do a little bit of stamping off. I'm going to start by stamping the outline of the flowers in the petal pink ink onto very vanilla cardstock. And I'm going to stamp this 3 times. Using the coordinating stamp, I'm going to stamp off, this is where I need that scrap paper. So I'm going to start by stamping off onto my scrap paper and then lining up the solid floral image with the outline image. So again, each time I'm going to stamp off and then stamp inside the outline of our flowers. The next thing I'm going to do is bring in my mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine and die cut these with the coordinating dies. And I'm just going to turn my die slightly until it lines up with my stamped image. And then proceed to run that through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Give me a nice clean cut. And I'll repeat that with each of the other 2 flowers. And I'll set that machine aside for now. And in my packet of pre-cut pieces, I also want to show you that I previously die cut 2 large and 2 small leaves from soft seafoam cardstock using these 2 dies that come in that Season of Chic die set. So let's get, I have one more thing I want to die cut. I have a piece of 3 1/4 by 4 1/2 inch very vanilla cardstock. Now this size will fit in my my mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. And I'm going to be die cutting a very small, or the smallest, deckled rectangle die. And I'm putting it towards the upper left corner of that cardstock. And I've got it positioned so that, see if you can see this better here. I've got it positioned so that the top of the die and the left side have about the same border of very vanilla cardstock around it. Okay. And then I'm just going to die cut that. I love that so many of our Stampin' Up! Dies can be used in our mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machines. I just find that this mini machine is so very convenient to use. It's lightweight and easy to handle. Now, as we're putting our first card together, I'm going to tell you to hang on to this small die cut piece because we'll be using this on the second card I make with you. So let's get started now putting our card together. My card base measures 4¼ inches by 11 inches, and it's scored at 5½ on the long side. Next, I have a piece of very vanilla cardstock that measures 4 7/8 inches, 4 7/8 by 3 5/8, 4 7/8 by 3 5/8. And then I have this beautiful piece of distressed gold specialty paper, which is just 1/8 of an inch smaller. And I'm going to adhere that piece of specialty paper to the very vanilla layer. And that piece of specialty paper, the distressed gold specialty paper, measures 4 3/4 by 4½ inches. And I'm going to adhere those layers to the center of my card front. Now, before I adhere this piece of cardstock, I do want to stamp a sentiment on it. Again, because I'm using a photopolymer stamp set and we need a little cushion underneath the cardstock to get the best stamping impression, I'm pulled in my Stampin' Pierce mat once again. And now I'm going to stamp Thanks from the Season of Chic stamp set right along the bottom of this piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to adhere this to my card base with some Stampin' Dimensionals. And I want to be sure that I have some of those dimensionals close to the edges of that window I cut with the smallest deckled rectangle die. And I'm also putting some dimensionals in each of the corners. And I'm adhering that with the dimensionals to the center of that card front. So now I've got these really nice layers here with the top layer popped up, and I've got this pretty window showing off that distressed gold specialty paper. Now I'm going to add my 3 flowers and the 4 leaves. Before I add those flowers, I want to show you a little trick that I like to do. And this adds a little bit more dimension to your flowers before you adhere them. It's super simple. Have your Stampin' Pierce mat. Using your, take your pick tool. I actually have 2 of these. One, I've got my piercing tip, plus it's got the spatula on the other end and the putty tip. And then on the other one, I keep my die cut brush and the stylus tips. So I've got my large stylus tip showing, and I'm just pushing down on the center of my flowers into that Stampin' Pierce mat. You want something cushiony when you do this. And then I'm going to adhere these flowers, and all I'm using to adhere them is 1 Stampin' Dimensional in the center on the back side. I'm going to adhere 1 at the top right corner of that open window, 1 off to the left side, and then 1 at the bottom of that window. I want a good part of that gold distressed specialty paper to be showing through the window. I don't want to completely cover up the window. And then next, I'm going to be adhering my leaves. Next, I'm going to be adhering my leaves with some multi-purpose glue, and I'm just using a tiny dot on the end, and I'm putting 1 small one here, 1 small leaf there, and then I'm going to add 1 larger leaf. And when you use just a one-dimensional behind the center of your flower, it makes it easy to tuck those leaves underneath the flowers. And then with the other small die cut leaf, I'm tucking that under the top flower, and I'm letting that hang over that gold, distressed gold specialty paper. And then lastly, another large leaf from the soft seafoam cardstock. I want to make sure I've got those adhered well. All right. And then next I'm going to, let me push those dies out of the way so I don't lose them. The next thing I want to do is embellish the center of my flowers. And to do that, I'm using the pastel adhesive backed sequins. And I'm using the gold. This gold on these sequins is a matte. It's not a shiny gold. It's a matte gold or a brushed gold look. So it really looks very, very nice with the distressed gold specialty paper. And then the last thing I have to do is I want to stamp a coordinating sentiment on the inside of this card. So I've got 5 1/4 by 4 inch, very vanilla cardstock, and I'm stamping a sentiment in petal pink. And the sentiment reads, "You are amazing beyond measure." So thanks, you are amazing beyond measure. And then I will simply adhere this to the inside of my card base. So there's the first card featuring the Season of Chic stamp set and coordinating dies. Keep in mind that this rectangle I use to cut the window is from the Deckled Rectangle dies collection, and it is the smallest rectangle or smallest die in that collection. This is the second card I'll be making with you. As you can see, it's quite a simple card. What makes it so beautiful is that it uses several layers, and it's also got some nice texture in that piece of soft seafoam cardstock in the center. So I'm starting with a card base of 5.5 by 8.5 inches, scored at 4 1/4 on the long side. And it's made of soft seafoam cardstock. I'm going to put a piece of Very Vanilla on the inside of my card base. And then I've got a few layers of Very Vanilla for the card front. This one measures 4 1/4 by 3 inches, and then the next size is just 1/8 inch longer. I'm going to adhere the layers to my card front with Stampin' Dimensionals. As you can see, I'm using up the last bit of one of my sheets here. I like to use every single bit of Stampin' Dimensionals. So when I use up all the pre-cut shapes, I then take my paper snips and snip around the outside edges. So there's no waste of my Stampin' Dimensionals. The next thing I want to do is emboss this piece of soft seafoam cardstock. This measures 2.5 inches by 3 3/4, 2.5 by 3 3/4. And once again, I can emboss this with my mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. And to do that, I'm using plate number 1 and plate number 4. And I'm going to emboss it with the Stripes embossing folder. Here are 2 mini embossing folders, and I'm using the stripes from the Stripes and Splatter set. You can find those embossing folders, that set of embossing folders, in the annual catalog. And look at the beautiful texture it gives me. So I'm going to add that to my card front. And remember from the first card, I said hang on to that small deckled rectangle. We're going to stamp a tiny message on there. And this tiny message reads, "I'm here for you." And I'm stamping it towards the top of that little rectangle. I'm going to add this with Stampin' Dimensionals. And I don't know why I keep losing my little sheet of dimensionals that I just had right here. Oh, here it is. It's stuck. Whoops. It was stuck to the back of my sequins embellishments. So I'm going to put this right in the center. So you can see I just have several layers of very vanilla and soft seafoam cardstock, which really creates a lot of interest as well as dimension. And it also creates a simple yet very elegant looking card. I'm going to finish this card front off with a bow made from this pretty gold trim. This is from the Simply Elegant Trim collection, and you get both gold and silver when you purchase this. I don't want my bow too big. I don't want it to overpower that tiny sentiment and the small rectangle in the center of my card. Here's one thing I do that may be of help to you. If I'm using just one of these colors, sometimes instead of taking the whole bolt off, I'll just pull an end through. I'll make a tiny opening in that Ziploc and just pull the end through and use it right there. And then I don't have that gold trim unraveling, or if I drop it, it doesn't go rolling away. And then I'm just going to add one dot of multi-purpose glue. I'm going to put the center of my bow right on top of that dot. And then I'm going to take one of my clear blocks and set that on top. Now you can certainly, whoops, this guy wants to turn here on me. You can certainly add your bow with one mini glue dot behind the knot. That works great. But I also like this method when the bows are so tiny. That way I'm not seeing any part of the mini glue dot because I've used the multi-purpose glue. Now, while I'm giving that a moment to dry, I'm going to, let me slide this off here. I'm going to stamp my envelopes. For this card, I'm going to stamp with soft seafoam as well as the crumb cake I pulled out. And I'm going to be stamping 2 seashells on this envelope. You know, I'm going to put my scrap paper here because I am going to stamp off the envelope just a little bit. So for those shells, I'm going to stamp first of all with crumb cake, and I want it just very subtle. So I'm going to stamp off with the crumb cake ink onto my scrap paper and then onto my envelope. And it's okay if your shells go off the edges of those envelope, or of the edges of the envelope. And then I'm going to stamp the center or fill in that each of the shells with soft seafoam ink, but I'm stamping off on the scrap paper and then onto my envelope. I'm going to do something similar for my first card. Remember, my first card is the one that had the 3 flowers in petal pink. So I'm going to close up both of these, get them out of the way, and then I'll bring my petal pink ink back in. And I'm going to basically stamp along the side edge here the left edge of my envelope. And first I'm going to stamp the outline of some flowers. 1, I'll do a few, 2, and I like to twist and turn them as I'm stamping. 3, 4, might do a little edge right there. And I think that's pretty good. Then to fill those flowers in, I'm going to stamp off on my scrap paper and then trying to line this up and then stamp onto my envelope. Again, stamping off each time onto the scrap paper and then stamping onto the envelope. And then if you want to fill in some of those other spaces, just stamp off onto your scrap paper with the inside or the solid image of your flowers and kind of stamp in between, just like that. And it gives the illusion of some more cards in there. Or not more cards, more flowers in the backgrounds. Okay, just like that. So let me get all of these things out of the way. We will bring the cards, or I will bring the cards and envelopes back in here for you to see them together. And aren't they just gorgeous? I love how these turned out. And I love the combination of very vanilla, petal pink, soft seafoam, and gold all together. I hope you like these cards as much as I've enjoyed making them for you. And if you are interested in more creative projects and inspiration using the Season of Chic stamp set and coordinating guides, be sure to go to stampandpiece.com and view my July 12th, 2023 post there, in which I show you how to make a simple card, then step it up with a few changes, and then take it to another level to sensational. Have a great day. Thanks for spending some time with me here at Stamp and Piece with Mary Nabe.